Snow fell like ground glass over Redemption Pass, slicing through the gray light of dawn as Sheriff Holt pulled his horse to a stop outside the timber stockade. Inside, a man sat chained to a post, coat torn, beard crusted with ice. Jonas Reed, the mountain trapper no one claimed to know but everyone feared, looked up as the sheriff stepped inside. "You still breathing?" Holt asked. "Mostly," Jonas said, his voice low, rough as bark. "Depends what you come to take next." The sheriff tossed a folded rope onto the table. "Not a thing, Reed. I came to give you a chance. Ain't had one of those in a long time. You'll get one now. Bride's gone missing. Eveline Carter, 2 days past. Headed over the ridge for her wedding in Silver Bend. Never made it." Jonas's eyes flicked up, wary. "And you want me to fetch her back? Why not your deputies?" Holt stared hard at him. "Because none of them can ride those cliffs and come back whole. You can. You know the pass better than any living man. That's the only reason I'm standing here instead of building the gallows." Jonas let out a dry laugh. "So that's the trade, huh? Her life for mine?" "By sunrise," Holt said flatly. "Bring her home, or I hang you where you stand." The words settled between them like dust. Jonas looked past him to the door where daylight poured in thin as mercy. "You'd trust me to walk out of here alive?" "No," the sheriff said, "but I'll trust the mountain to finish what I don't." He unhooked the shackle key from his belt and tossed it across the table. "You'll need a lantern, a rope, and your wits. I'd pray too if I were you." "I quit that habit." "Then maybe start again." Jonas stood, the iron cuff clattering free. He stretched his shoulders, the motion slow, deliberate, as if remembering what freedom felt like. "If I find her dead," he asked, "then dig her grave and start yours next to it." Outside, the storm had teeth. Jonas gathered what little he owned, an old rifle, a worn canteen, a strip of jerky, and stepped into the snow. The wind hit him like a fist. Behind him, Holt watched from the porch, arms crossed, jaw clenched. "You come back empty," he called, "and I swear to God, Reed, I'll make the mountain look merciful." Jonas didn't answer. He just lifted his collar and started up the ridge, each step vanishing under the white. The pass rose above him like judgment itself, narrow, silent, and endless. He knew its tricks, its hidden ledges and false trails, but not even he trusted it in weather like this. Still, there was something about the thought of that girl, stranded, scared, wearing a wedding dress in a world that didn't forgive, that kept his boots moving. Somewhere above, a hawk screamed against the wind. The sheriff's voice echoed faintly from below, carried by the storm. "Guide her home, Reed, or hang tomorrow." Jonas didn't look back. The mountain swallowed the sound, and by the time the first light broke through the clouds, he was already gone, one man chasing salvation through a storm that didn't care who lived or who deserved to. The climb began before the sun cleared the ridge, the cold so deep it bit through leather and breath alike. Jonas Reed moved through the white silence like a ghost that refused to lie down. The world around him was nothing but storm and echo. The crunch of snow under boots, the groan of wind dragging over stone, the faint jingle of the rope slung across his chest. He'd traveled this pass 100 times, but never with a noose waiting on the other side. Somewhere down the mountain, Sheriff Holt's men were likely betting on how long he'd last. He didn't blame them. He'd seen better men vanish in this range without a sound, without even a grave. Still, the mountain was the only thing he'd ever called home. He followed the faint scars of hooves in the snow, the trace of a wagon that had turned where it shouldn't, until the tracks broke off near a frozen stream. "Damn fool," he muttered, crouching beside it. A single print, a woman's boot, small and sinking, cut across the ice, heading toward the shadow of the cliffs. "Bride or ghost," he said to no one, "you picked the wrong place to lose yourself." The sky darkened again, clouds swallowing what little light was left. He pressed on. One step, then another, his breath fogging against the storm. He thought of Holt's face when he'd said guide her home or hang tomorrow. The man meant it. He'd seen the way lawmen hid mercy under their hats and called it justice. Jonas had lived under that kind of law before. It took his brother, his land, and most of what he believed in. Now, with the wind screaming through the pass, it felt like the whole world had come back to collect the debt. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time didn't mean much up here. The snow thickened until the world shrank to a few feet of white. Then, a sound, barely there, a cry, or maybe just wind curling through rock. He stopped, held his breath, and heard it again. Faint, broken, desperate. A woman's voice. He turned toward the cliffs, scanning the ledges. There, tangled in a drift near a fallen pine, was a splash of pale blue. Fabric. He ran, boots slipping, lungs tearing. The figure didn't move when he reached her. Her veil was frozen to her cheek, her hair rimed with frost. He brushed the snow from her face, fingers clumsy from cold. "Hey," he said roughly. "You still breathing?" No answer. He pressed his hand to her neck. Faint pulse, fragile but there. "Don't quit on me now," he muttered. He tore his coat open and wrapped it around her, lifting her as if she weighed nothing at all. The snow swirled thick around them, the wind roaring like it wanted to bury them both. "Guess I found you," he said through chattering teeth, shifting her weight. "Now let's see if I can keep us both alive." The mountain gave no reply, only the hollow cry of air through the gorge. Jonas tightened his grip, turned toward the narrow line of trees that marked a cave he half remembered, and began the long descent. Somewhere below, justice waited. But for the first time in years, he wasn't sure whose it was anymore. The cave sat carved into the mountain like a secret kept by the earth itself, half hidden behind a wall of frozen moss and broken pine. Jonas Reed ducked inside, the storm screaming at his back until the dark swallowed it whole. He laid the woman gently against the rock, her body limp, her lips blue as creek ice. His hands shook as he struck flint against steel, once, twice, until a small spark caught on a scrap of cloth and flared to life. Firelight spilled across the stone, turning the walls amber, painting her pale face with a breath of warmth. He pulled off her frozen boots, rubbed her feet with his palms, rough and careful all at once. She didn't stir. The storm howled outside like it meant to drag her back, but Jonas moved faster, stripping his coat and wrapping her in it, then leaning close to block the wind that clawed through the cave mouth. For a long time there was nothing. No movement, no sound, but his ragged breathing and the whisper of flame. Then a small twitch. Her fingers curled faintly, a sound escaping her throat, soft as a child's prayer. Jonas stilled, watching. "Easy now," he whispered, voice hoarse. "You're still in this world." She blinked once, her eyes unfocused, silver gray beneath lashes iced with snow. Her lips moved, but no words came. He pressed a hand to her shoulder, not to restrain, but to ground her. "Save it," he said. "You'll need air more than talk." She turned her face toward the fire, her breath shallow but steadying. He fed another branch into the flame, the sparks leaping high and warm. In the silence that followed, something shifted between them, an understanding beyond words, born of survival, of two lives caught on the same fragile thread. He studied her quietly, the torn silk sleeve, the bruises beneath the frost, the ring still clinging to her finger like a promise no one had kept. His throat tightened. She didn't belong out here. No one did. He reached for his canteen, poured a few drops of melted snow against her lips. She swallowed weakly, her eyes fluttering open for a heartbeat. He saw fear there, but also something else, something he couldn't name. Gratitude, maybe, or disbelief that anyone had come at all. "Rest," he murmured. "I'll keep the fire." She closed her eyes again, and he leaned back, exhaustion dragging at him like lead. The flames cracked, soft and rhythmic, their glow dancing over the stone like ghosts come to listen. He thought about the sheriff waiting down below, the rope already knotted, the gallows beam creaking in his mind. But for the first time in years, Jonas didn't feel like a man already dead. He felt the pulse of another life against the silence, faint but stubborn. He stretched his legs, the rifle across his knees, his gaze fixed on the snow spinning outside. For now the world was reduced to one fire, one cave, and one woman who wasn't ready to die. He didn't pray, but the way he kept feeding that flame looked an awful lot like faith. By morning, the storm had thinned to whispers. Pale light slipped into the cave, catching the edges of the bride's frozen veil and turning it almost holy. Jonas Reed sat near the fire, half asleep against the wall, one hand still resting on the butt of his rifle. When she stirred, the sound was small, a shift of fabric, a quiet gasp, the kind a person makes when their body remembers how to live. Her eyes opened slowly, scanning the cave, the smoke, the man by the fire. He turned his head toward her but didn't move closer. "You'll live," he said quietly. "Didn't think you would, but you proved me wrong." Her voice came out rough, barely more than breath. "Who are you?" "Jonas Reed. Sheriff sent me." She blinked, trying to sit up, her strength still a rumor. "The sheriff?" "Said you were due to marry a man named Carter," Jonas said. "He offered me rope or redemption." The name hit her like a slap. Her eyes darted away. "You're the outlaw." "That's what they say," he answered. "But if I was, I'd have left you where I found you." Silence. The fire cracked between them. Finally, she said, "You should have." He almost smiled. "Too late now. The storm's passed, but the ridge ain't safe till noon. You can rest or freeze trying to climb before you can stand." "You could have left while I slept." "Could have," he said, "but I've done enough leaving in my life." She looked at him then, properly. Beneath the grime and frost, he didn't look like a monster, just a man who'd seen too much cold in too many years. Her eyes dropped to the scar on his forearm, raw and crooked. "How'd you get that?" "Fire. The kind started by lawmen too proud to check the names on the deeds first." She went quiet, the meaning settling in. "My fiancé. His name's Aaron Carter," she said slowly. "He owned half this valley. You worked for him once." "Did," Jonas said, voice low, "until his men raided the timber camps and blamed it on me." Her lips parted, disbelief flickering with something darker. "You're saying—" "I'm saying the man you were meant to marry tried to hang me 3 winters back. Sheriff just offered him the chance to finish it proper this time." The truth hung there, heavy as the smoke curling between them. Eveline's fingers clenched around the edge of her dress. "Then why save me?" "Because I don't aim to die for his lies," Jonas said, standing, his shadow long across the cave wall. "And because some part of me still believes a person can walk back from what the world calls them." She watched him check the rope, his movements calm, deliberate. "You'll take me back?" "That's the deal." "And if he tries again?" He paused, looking at her, something sharp flickering behind his tired eyes. "Then maybe this time, I stop running." Outside, the wind began to rise again, carrying the echo of a world that didn't forgive easily. Jonas slung his pack over his shoulder and met her gaze. "Cover your face, Mrs. Carter," he said. "The mountain don't care who you belong to, but the men down there do." By the time they left the cave, the world had turned white again, and the path that led down the ridge was no more than a faint scar under drifting snow. Jonas Reed walked first, the rope tied loosely around his waist, the other end knotted to the bride's wrist to keep her from vanishing into the fog. She barely spoke, her breath shallow, her steps clumsy. He'd seen frostbite, starvation, even madness, but what worried him most was the color creeping into her cheeks, not the flush of health, but the warning red of fever. "You keep moving," he said without looking back. "Stop too long and the cold will finish what the storm couldn't." She tried to answer, but only managed a hoarse whisper. He turned, saw the way her eyes unfocused, her lips trembling as if she were arguing with ghosts. "Damn it," he muttered, dropping his pack and reaching for her arm. "Don't you quit now." He lifted her against his chest, her head falling against his shoulder, the weight no burden at all. The snow stung his face as he trudged forward, one step at a time, every muscle screaming. He remembered carrying his brother down this same ridge years ago. Different storm, same silence, same feeling that the mountain didn't take lives so much as keep them for itself. When the first tree line appeared through the haze, he found a hollow beneath a ledge, sheltered from the wind, and set her down. She shivered violently, her eyes fluttering open for just a second. "You're burning up," he muttered. He stripped off his gloves, pressed his palm against her forehead. "Fever," he said to no one, the word landing heavy as stone. He built a fire quick, hands raw, breath short. The rhythm of survival as steady as any prayer. When the flames took, he filled his canteen with snow and set it near the coals. Her skin glistened with sweat now, her breathing shallow. "Don't do this," he murmured, his tone sharper than plea. "Not after getting this far." He soaked his scarf in melted snow and laid it across her brow. She stirred, whispering something incoherent, fragments of a name: Aaron, Mother, Mercy. Jonas hushed her, wiping her face with gentle hands. "Forget him," he said quietly. "You're not his to bury." The fire crackled louder, the smoke curling like a lullaby around them both. As hours slipped by, he sat beside her, humming under his breath. A song he hadn't remembered he knew, the one his mother used to hum while waiting out storms. When the fever broke near midnight, her body went still. Her breathing slow and even, relief hit him like a blow. He exhaled, his head falling back against the rock. "You stubborn thing," he said softly. "Didn't think either of us would make it this far." Outside, the wind had gentled, the snow thinning to a light drift. He stirred the coals one last time and looked at her face. The pain eased now, the color soft and human again. For a moment, the mountain felt less like judgment and more like witness. And in that fragile silence, Jonas Reed, outlaw and savior both, kept his vigil. Not because he owed her life, but because for the first time in years, he'd remembered how to keep one alive. The morning broke clear and sharp, the kind of cold that stripped every sound down to its bones. Jonas Reed woke before the light touched the ridge, the embers in the fire glowing faint under a blanket of ash. The fever had left her weak but alive. Eveline Carter slept quietly now, her breath steady, her hands no longer trembling. He rose slowly, joints aching, the ache of a man who had carried more than his own weight through too many winters. Outside the hollow, the world lay still and endless, white stretching into white, horizon swallowed by distance. He stepped into it, testing the air, his boots sinking ankle deep. tracks wound faintly through the drifts, leading downward. Not hers, not his. Wider, heavier. Horsemen. 3, maybe 4. He crouched, fingers brushing the fresh indentations. Holt's men, he thought. Or worse. He straightened, scanning the horizon, listening. Far down the pass, a hawk's cry broke the silence. He felt it in his spine, the kind of quiet that comes before something wrong. When he turned back, she was standing in the cave's mouth, wrapped in his coat, the morning light catching the pale gold in her hair. Her face looked older somehow, sharper, the fever gone, but something steadier in its place. "You shouldn't be up," he said. "You shouldn't be alone," she answered. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she glanced toward the tracks. "Someone's coming." "Yeah," he said. "Could be the sheriff." "And if it's not?" He looked at her long, then toward the valley. "Then we find another way down." She tried to smile, failed, and took a careful step toward him, her bare feet sinking into snow. "You saved me twice now," she said quietly. "Don't ruin it by getting killed." He almost laughed at that. "Wouldn't be the first bad choice I made for someone I barely knew." He began gathering what little they had left, the rope, the rifle, the remains of the bread, and handed her the canteen. "Drink slow," he said. "You'll need it." They started down the pass together, the sound of their steps the only thing breaking the silence. The wind picked up, carrying faint echoes, a shout, a horse's snort, the jingle of iron. Jonas froze, motioning her behind a rock outcropping. He waited, pulse steady but high, watching shapes move through the fog below. 3 riders, rifles slung, one with a badge glinting in the sun. Holt's men, but not Holt himself. "They'll be here soon," he murmured. "If they find me before we reach the valley, it won't matter what I did or didn't do." "Then we keep moving," she said, her voice trembling but firm. He glanced back at her, surprised by the steel in it. "You sure you can walk that far?" "I don't have much choice." "Neither do I." He tightened the rope around his shoulder, offered her his hand. She took it, her grip cold but sure. Together they moved, 2 dark figures cutting through the white, their tracks trailing behind them like a confession. Neither spoke again. Words felt too fragile for the soundless expanse around them. And as they disappeared into the folds of the mountain, the wind rose once more, carrying away their footprints almost as fast as they could make them. By the time Jonas Reed and Eveline Carter reached the valley, the sun had long given up on warmth. The snow thinned into gray mud, the air heavy with smoke from the chimneys of Silver Bend. The town came into view like a scar, lean buildings, a church spire, and at its center, a wooden platform Jonas didn't need to look twice at to know what it was. The gallows waited. Sheriff Holt stood near it, coat flapping in the wind, eyes like iron when he saw them approach. "You made it," he said. "Wasn't betting on that." Jonas led the mare down the last slope, Eveline still wrapped in his coat, her veil torn, her face pale but alive. "You said by sunrise," Jonas muttered. "Sun's still up somewhere." Holt's jaw tightened. "You found her alive, I'll give you that. But word is you shot 2 of my deputies on the ridge." "I didn't fire a damn thing." "Then who did?" Jonas turned toward Eveline. "Ask her." She blinked at him, then looked at the sheriff. "There were men," she said quietly. "They weren't your deputies. They were Aaron Carter's hands. He sent them after me." Murmurs rippled through the onlookers who'd started to gather. Holt frowned. "That so?" "They said he'd pay double if I never came back," she added, her voice shaking but steady enough. Holt's eyes narrowed. That don't sound like the Aaron Carter I know. You don't know him at all, she said sharply. You only know the man he pays you to protect. The sheriff's hand twitched near his revolver. Careful what you say, ma'am. Careful what you do, Jonas cut in. She's been through hell, and I dragged her back from it. Don't you dare call her a liar. The crowd stirred again. Miners, merchants, wives clutching shawls tighter against the cold. Holt stepped forward, his boots crunching in the half-frozen dirt. The law don't bend for sympathy, Reed, he said. You're still wanted for theft, assault, and resisting arrest. That law you keep quoting, Jonas said quietly. How many times it saves someone worth saving? You think you get to choose who that is? I think someone ought to. The tension stretched thin as a drawn wire. Then Eveline moved, stepping between them, her chin high despite the tremor in her hands. Sheriff Holt, she said clearly, this man saved my life when your law would have let me die. You hang him, and you'll hang whatever honor this town pretends to have left. A few men shifted uneasily. Holt's mouth hardened. The law's the law. And mercy's the thing you forgot, she said. For a moment, no one breathed. The only sound was the slow creak of the gallows rope twisting in the wind. Holt stared at her, then at Jonas, his jaw grinding. You both stay in town tonight, he said finally. Tomorrow we'll let the people decide what happens. You mean the same people who watch a hanging like it's a sermon? Jonas muttered. Holt turned away. You just make sure you're there to answer for what you are. Jonas looked at Eveline, her eyes bright with defiance and fear. What I am, he said softly, might change by morning. The next morning broke thin and gray over Silver Bend, the kind of light that made the whole town look carved from regret. By the time the bell over the church struck 8, every soul in earshot had gathered near the square. The gallows loomed at the center, the rope swinging like it already knew its work. Sheriff Holt stood on the platform, face carved from stone, his badge catching the dull light. Jonas Reed waited at the base, wrists bound, coat gone, eyes steady. Eveline Carter stood a few steps away, her torn veil tied around her shoulders like a banner, refusing to hide her bruises. The wind carried the murmur of voices, half anger, half curiosity. Outlaw, one man whispered. Hero, another countered. Holt raised his hand, and the noise died. This town lives by law, he said. And the law says no man walks free after shedding blood, no matter who he saves. Jonas didn't answer. He didn't look at the sheriff or the rope, only at the crowd, searching for one face that still believed in truth. Then Eveline moved. She climbed the steps, her boots scraping wood, her breath clouding in the cold. When she reached the top, her voice cut through the silence. You think this is justice? She asked. You think hanging one man fixes what's wrong with this place? Holt's jaw twitched. Stand down, Mrs. Carter. I will not. She turned to the crowd, eyes blazing. You all remember Aaron Carter. You praised him as decent, God-fearing. But he sent men to kill me before the wedding ever began. He paid them to make sure no one saw the bruises he left. Gasps rippled through the square. A few women covered their mouths. Lies, Holt spat. I've known Carter 10 years. Eveline met his gaze, calm and certain. Then look in his office. She reached into her torn dress, pulling a folded letter, edges singed from the storm's fire. I took this from his wagon before he left me in the pass. She handed it to the sheriff. He hesitated, then opened it, his eyes narrowing as he read. The crowd strained to hear, but the words on his lips were enough. Half pay when the body's found. A heavy stillness fell. Read it out loud, someone shouted. Holt's voice faltered, the badge on his chest suddenly dull. He finished the letter, his face turning pale. A miner near the gallows barked, "So the outlaw saved her, and the husband tried to kill her? You gonna hang the wrong man, Holt?" More voices rose, anger curling into the wind. Eveline stood tall beside Jonas. "He carried me through death itself," she said. "He gave me life the man you trusted tried to take. If you hang him, you hang what's left of your soul." The sheriff's hand went to his revolver, but he didn't draw. The crowd shifted closer, restless, the tide turning faster than he could control. Finally, Holt threw the letter into the snow, jaw clenched. "Cut him loose." No one moved at first. Then the blacksmith stepped forward, knife in hand, slicing the rope around Jonas's wrists. The fibers fell away like a verdict overturned. Jonas looked at Holt, but said nothing. He just took Eveline's trembling hand as the crowd closed around them, not in fury, but in something quieter, heavier. Respect. For the first time, Silverbend bowed its head. The rope lay coiled in the snow like a snake that had lost its venom, and for a long while no one dared to speak. The crowd stood stunned, the echo of the sheriff's surrender still trembling in the air. Jonas Reed rubbed his wrists, red and raw, the blood returning like a slow confession. Eveline Carter stood beside him, her hand still clutching the torn letter, her face pale but unbowed. Around them, the townsfolk began to stir, not the angry mob of an hour ago, but something quieter, ashamed. The blacksmith who'd cut the rope shifted his hat. "Man risked his life for her," he said. "Ain't that what we're all supposed to do?" Another voice joined. "The sheriff knew better and did it anyway." Then another. "We all did." It spread like thaw through the cold. Holt turned, face gray, eyes hollow. He looked at Jonas, then at Eveline. "I ain't the villain you want me to be," he said, voice low. "But maybe I let the wrong man hang too many times." He pulled the badge from his coat, the metal dull in his shaking hand. "This belongs to someone better." He dropped it in the snow. No one stopped him as he walked away, the sound of his boots fading down the street like the end of a bad sermon. Jonas stood still, snow catching in his hair, the air thick with a strange, painful peace. Eveline reached for him, fingers brushing the rope burns on his wrists. "You're free now," she said softly. He looked down at her, eyes unreadable. "Free's a word men use till they owe something again." "Then let it mean something different this time." "To who?" "To yourself." Her voice wavered, but she didn't look away. He wanted to speak, to tell her she didn't owe him anything, that he hadn't saved her for redemption or for law, but for the faint sound of life that refused to die in her chest that night in the storm. But the words stuck, too heavy to fit through his throat. Instead, he just nodded, rough and small, the kind of gesture that meant more than speech ever could. The people began to drift off, murmuring, some ashamed, some changed. When they were alone, Eveline turned to him again. "What will you do now?" "What I've always done," he said. "Find a place the law forgot and see if I can live there a while. And if the world follows, then I keep walking." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that made the wind seem warmer. "Then I suppose I'll have to bring you bread when you forget to come down for it." He chuckled once, quiet and disbelieving. "You'd cross that mountain again?" "If I had to," she said. "Some debts are worth paying twice." Jonas met her eyes for the last time before turning toward the ridge, the snow crunching beneath his boots. The crowd had gone, the sheriff was gone, and the rope, his sentence and salvation both, lay at her feet. She bent, lifted it, and dropped it into the fire. The flames swallowed it whole, the smoke curling upward like a prayer that didn't need words. Spring came late to the mountains that year, shy and uncertain, but when it finally arrived, it came like forgiveness. The snow melted from the ridges in long silver veins, feeding the rivers that wound through the valley where Silver Bend slept quieter than before. Jonas Reed built his cabin near the same pass where the storm had nearly taken both their lives, high enough that the world below looked small, harmless. The walls were rough-hewn, the roof patched with tar, the kind of home that didn't need to be beautiful to be real. He rose early each morning to split wood, feed the mule, and listen to the wind thread through the pines. Some days, he almost forgot what the word outlaw used to mean. Other days, he carried it like a scar he could finally stop hiding. The town didn't see much of him. A few hunters caught glimpses, a figure by the riverbank, mending traps, smoke curling from a far chimney. They said he never carried a gun anymore. They said he didn't need to. One evening, when the light stretched long and the sky burned gold, a rider appeared at the edge of his clearing. The mare was pale, her saddle clean, the rider wrapped in a blue shawl that the wind seemed to remember. Eveline Carter dismounted without a word. She looked smaller now, softer around the eyes. But when she smiled, it was the same quiet strength that had stared down the gallows. "Didn't think you'd come back up here," Jonas said, his voice gentle but wary. "Didn't think I'd have reason to," she replied. "But the sheriff's gone east, the town's different. They're calling it peace, though I doubt it'll last." "It never does," he said. "Still, nice to see it try." She laughed softly. "You look well." "You sound surprised." "Not surprised," she said, glancing at the little garden he'd started beside the cabin. "Proud, maybe." He shrugged, uneasy with praise. "I just keep things alive when I can." "You always did," she said, and there was a warmth in it that made him look away. They sat outside as the sun dropped behind the peaks, the sky shifting from gold to fire, then ash. She unpacked bread and a small jar of honey, setting them between them like an offering. They ate in silence, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the distant cry of a hawk fading into dusk. When she finally rose to leave, he stood too. "You'll ride back before dark," he said. "The pass gets mean after sundown." "You'd come looking if I didn't," she teased. "Probably," he admitted, the corner of his mouth lifting. She looked at him one last time, eyes bright in the dying light. "Then I guess I'll keep giving you reasons." She mounted, turned her horse toward the trail, and rode off slow, her shawl fluttering behind her like a flag left for mercy. Jonas watched until she disappeared into the trees. The wind carried the scent of pine and smoke, and for the first time in a long while, the mountain didn't feel empty. It felt alive, like it was listening. He turned back toward the cabin, the fire glowing warm inside, and closed the door gently, leaving it unlatched. Just in case someone came knocking. Please like, share, and subscribe to support more true-hearted stories on Stories Left Behind. If you'd been in Silver Bend that morning, would you have cut the rope or watched in silence? Tell us in the comments.